Hello again. It has occurred to me that blank firing pistols seem to get a lot of attention on my channel compared to everything else I've made videos on. In particular, one video I made called Jailed for This, where I was basically talking about a guy who was arrested for having a collection of illegal blank firing replicas, got quite a lot of attention. That video got 12,000 views, and in the grand scheme of YouTube, that's obviously nothing. But for my channel, that's quite significant, and it's occurred to me that people seem to be really interested in blank firing guns. Now, I don't know if I've had any influence on that. I don't know if people have just discovered my channel and went, oh, I could have a blank firing gun, I want to buy one of those. Or if it's people with a pre-existing interest. So I don't know what influence I've had, but I sort of realised it might be a good idea if I made a video talking about acting responsibly and being safe with a blank firing gun. So on that note, we're just going to briefly talk about what the law says about blank firing guns. Now, there is quite a lot to know, so I'm not going to list everything, and obviously I'm not a lawyer, I'm certainly not an expert, I'm just an idiot on YouTube who has a hobby of talking about firearms, knives, crossbows and that sort of thing. So that's really all you should regard this as. This is definitely not legal advice, I'm literally just a guy with a hobby. That said, I've read the law numerous times because it concerns me personally. This is my hobby, I'm not a part of any club association or anything, I'm just a guy on the internet who enjoys these things. But I think it is important to know what the law says. So to begin with, you do not need a license to own a blank firing gun in the UK, and that includes Scotland, because the law in Scotland is quite different from England and Wales. For example, in Scotland we need a license to own an air rifle that's less than 12 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, or an air pistol of less than 6 foot-pounds muzzle energy. This does not apply to England and Wales. But what I'm about to tell you now about blank firing pistols applies to Scotland, England and Wales. I've not got a clue what the situation is in Northern Ireland, unfortunately. Now, further to you not requiring a licence and only needing to be over 18, you don't need a background check, you don't need to do a medical check, you don't need to do anything. You just have to confirm that you're over 18 and you can buy these guns through the post. There are many websites that sell these, such as Just Air Guns, and if you want to visit your local registered firearms dealer, believe it or not, there are a lot of those in the UK, Scotland included. Go in there, anywhere that sells air guns, anywhere that sells airsoft guns, anywhere that sells firearms and shotguns, there's a good chance that they'll sell blank firing guns. Go in there and ask if they have any blank firing guns. And I say that because I get a lot of questions asking where can I get them, and obviously I can't reply to every single one of them. But I bought mine at Just BB Guns, or Just Air Guns, I don't remember which. They're basically the same company, just a different website. Alternatively, Airsoft World also sell blank firing guns under their I think it's blank firing replica section. Further to that, I think this pistol has possibly been discontinued because I can't find it for sale anywhere. A lot of people have asked me where can I get this pistol, and they've also asked can they buy this gun off me, and I have to confirm this gun is not for sale. This is a part of my personal collection and I'm not prepared to part with it. Next part is the Violent Crimes Reductions Act 2006. That's the whole reason why this gun has to be in a silly colour. Not because I painted it that, not because I like orange, although I do kind of like orange. No, that's just what the law says, unfortunately. It's a criminal offence to alter the colour to make it look like a realistic imitation firearm, and that is a term that's used in the law, realistic imitation firearm, RIF. This is not a realistic imitation firearm as it stands, as part of the gun is 50% a silly colour to distinguish it from the live firearm. This also applies to airsoft guns. However, there are certain exemptions to where you can have your airsoft or your blank firing gun in the correct colours. For example, if you're part of a reenactment group or society, you're fulfilling your crim duties, you're an airsoft skirmisher, you're doing theoretical productions. Unfortunately, being a collector is not a reason, although I think you can get an exemption if you're part of a gun club. Shortly we're going to talk about safety, but first, where can you shoot your blank firing gun? Anywhere you have permission, basically. What that means is your back garden, and we'll get to that in a minute, a piece of land that, say, a farmer has given you permission to shoot in. So if you know a farmer and they say you can shoot in a field, you can shoot in that field, and that's perfectly legal. And obviously if you're a member of a gun club and they give you permission to shoot it there, that's also fine. Where you cannot shoot it: common land, parks, school grounds, anywhere that the public has access to. Basically, there's nowhere you could shoot other than those specified places. Unless you have the express permission from the landowner, it is illegal to shoot there. Now, one thing that is fine is your friend's garden. So if you have your own blank firing pistol and your friend invites you over and your friend gives you permission to bring your blank firing pistol, obviously that's okay. But on the topic of back gardens, I would ask you consider whether or not that's a good idea. Now, I've only put about 150 rounds through this gun, if that. And the reason for that is I don't really have anywhere to shoot it. The only time that I've ever really fired this gun is during fireworks night, because obviously there's already a lot of explosions going off. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, especially as I do it in my shed so it can't be seen. These do produce a flash and it is a very loud bang, just like the real steel firearm. It could easily confuse a member of the public, so please seriously consider where you fire it. I would suggest that a garage that is just standing by itself with no other buildings attached might be okay. Depends how thick the wall is and if you've got any sort of sound dampening or anything. That said, I did actually, on fireworks night, I did actually fire this much smaller blank firing pistol. By the way, this one here is an 8mm centre fire. We'll get to that shortly if I remember. And this revolver is 2-2 round fire, so it's a much smaller cartridge, and we'll talk about cartridges just shortly. But I did fire this just in my shed, and I had my girlfriend standing outside and she couldn't really hear it too much. It is audible, but nowhere near as loud as if she was standing right beside me, and we'll get on to the bangs and the noises just shortly. Speaking of noise and cartridges, the cartridges that these blank firing guns do fire is very similar to the cartridges used in a live firearm. This is the box of cartridges that this gun actually fires. These are 8mm blanks. So as you can see, they look exactly like live cartridges. In fact, I have a real cartridge here. Now this is not live, I am not a license holder. This is inert, there's no powder in this cartridge, and the primer has been struck. This is not a live cartridge, it's essentially a dummy. If I place it in here, you can see that it is quite similar. Obviously it's a bit bigger as this is a 9mm. So this is what your 8mm blank cartridges look like. These are made of steel, not brass, whereas your real cartridges are made from brass. I'm not entirely sure why the blanks are made of steel, but I have a feeling it's something to do with the fact that the cartridge expands, and if it expanded inside the blank firing gun it would cause damage to the gun, as these are not meant for that sort of pressure. We'll quickly just go over the parts of the cartridge, just for anyone that doesn't actually understand how it works. So inside here is actually where the powder is. That's your propellant. That's what sends, at least in a firearm, that's what sends the bullet out of the barrel, is the built up pressure of that exploding. Kind of like the combustion of petrol inside your engine. If we look here, this little part here, that's called the rim. That is where the extractor of the gun pulls out the spent cartridge. I'm sure you would have seen when guns are fired, the casing flies out the side. That's what that's for. And if we have a look here on the bottom, that brass piece there is called the, I forgot the name of it. The primer, that's it. The firing pin hits on the bottom of the primer, which ignites the propellant, which sets off the gun. Now, if you have a look here, there's a little green piece. That's just wax. That's holding in the propellant, because obviously on a live cartridge, or in this case an inert one, would have a bullet. Obviously the bullet would hold in the propellant, but with a blank you don't have the bullet, so something has to hold in the propellant. And here we have that revolver. This is the Olympic 6. By the way, this is the mini gap I forgot to mention, but this is the Olympic 6. This is probably one of the cheapest blank firing guns you can get. Guns like this usually cost upwards of £100. This one only costs £45 and it's still available today. It's an 8-shot revolver that's not really a replica of anything. In fact, these are used as starter pistols for starting a race. Usually revolvers have 6 chambers inside the cylinder. This one has 8. Now, as it's a revolver, it can fire a few different size cartridges, but this is what I use in mine. These are, I don't actually know the proper name, but on the tin it says 6mm blanks. These are very small ones. Obviously you can get longer ones, just depending on what you want to use, but obviously the smaller it is, the less of a bang. If I just quickly compare the two, they're two drastically different cartridges, but these are two of the most common. Now you can also get the exact same cartridge as this one in 9mm if you so wish, and obviously that'll be closer to this. Now I'm sure you'll be under no illusion that in the UK our gun laws are actually very strict, and some people, including the media, will also have you believe that blank firing guns are easy to convert into live firearms. I would like to let you know that this is actually false. To the best of my knowledge, it is not an easy thing to do. I have mentioned previously this gun is £100. For the real steel counterpart, it's about 800. Now you have to ask yourself why. This is not built to the same standard, the same quality as a live firearm. Not only that, this basically doesn't actually have a barrel. I'll just move my head out of the way so this isn't pointing at me, but if you have a look in there you might be able to see it's blocked with metal. Now some people might want to say drill that out, make it into a live gun, put a BB or a pellet in it, etc. Well, that's actually a very serious criminal offence. What you're then doing is converting this blank firing replica into a Section 5 prohibited firearm. You might as well have the real thing. Which brings me on to the next thing. I don't know if I mentioned or not, but this is a top venting blank firing replica opposed to a front venting blank firing replica. This is to comply with UK law. Pistols are basically outright illegal in the UK, with very few people having access to them. Not that this has much effect on gun crime. In fact, gun crime with handguns has actually continued. And many blank firing replicas in Europe and America are front venting, which means the gases, the flame, the fireball and all the pressure comes out the front of the barrel. On a top venting blank firing replica, if I close the gun, you'll see that there's this little port up here. This is to let all the gas and the flames come out, so all the blast, the fireball, actually comes out the top of the breech instead of the front of the muzzle. This is so you cannot put something like a BB, a pellet or even a live cartridge through the firearm, through the blank gun. Now, I did say previously about not being able to fire live cartridges in this, as well as speculate the reasons these blanks are made of steel. Steel is obviously a stronger material than brass, and the brass will expand more with the heat, whereas the steel will not. I believe the reason is, as I said, these are not actually pressure bearing chambers. If you were to put a live round through this, or a round that was too hot, the gun would explode, causing an injury to the user, and obviously this is a very serious criminal offence. If you drill out that barrel and do anything in any way, shape or form to try and make this gun fire a projectile, that's a Section 5 criminal offence and it's punishable by 5 years in prison. So consider that. Okay, now perhaps the most important part of this video, I want to talk about gun safety. So for this reason, I'm just going to remove the cartridges from the equation at the moment, because we don't want to make any mistakes and there's no need for it to be here anyway. I do, however, have some blanks that have already been fired, which will be safe, or safer at least, to put into the gun. At all times these will be treated as live firearms, even though they're silly kid looking, toy looking things that can't actually hurt you in the first place. We're going to treat them with respect at all times. So to begin with, the semi-automatic pistol. How to approach this? How do we make sure it's safe before we pick it up? Because if you've not picked it up in a while, or even if you have, you need to make sure it's safe, and there's a few different steps you must take to ensure that the gun is safe. So we should go over the safe handling rules. Never point a gun at anyone, even in fun. Always assume the gun is loaded, even when it is not. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Know what's beyond your target. Always be in control of the muzzle direction, and never let the gun point at any part of the body, loaded or unloaded. Now those are the very basics. Depending on what it is you're doing with what, there are some other things here and there that you should know, but that's just the absolute bare minimum. It's also a very wise decision to keep the gun unloaded when it's not being used. You shouldn't leave ammunition in the gun while it's unattended. And in many cases, this is actually illegal. For example, if you have a shotgun certificate, and certificate holders will know this, if you have a shotgun certificate and you leave a shotgun shell in the shotgun, even if it's in the cabinet, well, I'm fairly sure that could be a criminal offence and it's a dangerous situation. So when you pick up the blank firing gun, the first thing you want to do is make sure it's unloaded. So when you pick it up, make sure to keep the finger off of the trigger, such as like this, pointing the gun in a safe direction. And although this is a blank firing replica where even if you did have a misfire or a negligent discharge, you're obviously not going to shoot anything in front of you as the barrel is blocked and there's no projectile. These rules apply to all guns, including blank firing guns. We treat this as a live loaded firearm at all times. Don't think because it's a blank firing gun and because it's orange it can't hurt you. For one thing, it will make your ears ring, that's for sure. It is really bad practice to not follow these rules. And believe me, I'm a person that does not like rules, and I follow these very strictly. With the gun pointed in a safe direction, with your finger off the trigger, find the magazine release, which in this case is right here. Remove the magazine. It is a good idea to make sure there's no cartridges in there. However, even with the magazine removed, there can still be a cartridge in the chamber. To check to make sure there's not a cartridge in the chamber, pull the slide back and inspect the breech by eye. Now you could pull it back like this and hold it, or you could use the magazine catch. So there, we could see that the gun is unloaded, there's no blanks, there's nothing in there that shouldn't be. Some guns have a safety catch, which this one does, although the real steel Glock does not. Some guns also have a two-stage trigger, such as this one. So the safety catch on this gun is located right here, and as you may notice, it's been off safe the entire time. It is a good idea to use a safety catch, although I like to keep it in my head to not use, just to not trust it, because a safety catch is a mechanical device and it can fail. Some guns don't even have a safety catch, especially older ones. So in the up position, and this is unique to this gun, all guns are different, but in the up position the gun is on fire, so if I pull the trigger it will fire. So if I cock it again, drop the firing pin, if I put it down it's on safe. But we absolutely do not want to trust the safety catch. Now I said about that two-stage trigger, if I just put my finger here it won't pull all the way. So if I just, and again keeping in mind it's empty, cock the gun, it won't fire as it has a two-stage trigger. We need to pull both triggers at the same time, but that's more of a Glock thing. Most other guns don't have that. Right, so remember what I just said not long ago about if the magazine is removed, there could still be a round in the chamber. That's why you always inspect it every time you pick it up or hand it to a person, as well as inspecting the gun before you put it away. And as you'll notice, the gun is cocked, obviously because I just pulled the slide back, and the gun is off safe. So had that been a cartridge that I hadn't already fired, it could have gone off. But this is why we follow safe handling procedures. And by the way, if anyone was concerned, this is a dummy blank. This is one that I had already fired and I drilled it out. I drilled out the wax and I drilled out the primer, so this is of no danger. This is just an empty piece of steel. We'll have a quick look at revolvers. Now please keep in mind, I am definitely not a firearms expert, I'm not a blank gun expert, I'm not an expert or anything, I'm just a hobbyist. But I'm just trying to encourage safe handling, because I'd like my sport and my hobby to continue, and people doing silly things really puts that in a bad position. We'll have a look at this revolver. Remember what I said before about the safety catch. This revolver doesn't have a safety catch. So because some of my guns do have a safety catch and some of them don't, I like to get in the habit of not relying on the safety catch. But as I said, a safety catch is a mechanical device, and mechanical devices can fail. The safety catch is between your ears, it's called your brain. So think about what you're doing every time you pick up a gun. So the revolver, quite a simple thing. To use it on this particular model, you pull out like this. You have the 8-shot cylinder, and obviously you put the cartridges straight into the cylinder. I've already showed you this, the cartridges, but I do have some spent ones. So basically what you do with these is you just put it straight into the revolver like this. Although this one might not fit, here we go. And just close it up. So that's how that works. To make sure it's safe, or to inspect it, you just want to remove the cylinder. It's as simple as that. There's no magazine to remove, no slide to rack, you just pull out the cylinder. And obviously if there's nothing in there at all, then you know it's unloaded. But every time you pick it up, you should remove that cylinder to do a visual inspection, and also make sure the hammer isn't cocked. This one's a bit awkward to put back, there we go. Now to fire one of these, usually what you do is you want to cock the hammer, and that makes it considerably easier to pull the trigger. But this is a double and a single action gun, so you could actually just pull the trigger straight away, although it's a lot more difficult to pull the trigger when the hammer is not cocked. It's personal preference really, but this just goes to show if there's ammunition in the gun, if you pull that trigger it will fire. There's no mechanical devices preventing the gun being fired. Now I want to talk a little bit about storage. Now as it stands at the moment, you're under no legal obligation in the UK to keep these in a safe. You're under no legal obligation to lock them up out of sight or anything like that. In fact, as far as the law is concerned, at the moment at least, you could leave this loaded on your coffee table. I wouldn't advise that, especially not loaded, but really it is up to you at the moment where you keep your gun. For me personally, at the moment, I keep both of my blank firing pistols in a glass display cabinet in my living room, as I am a collector. I keep them there in an uncocked, unloaded state that is as safe as possible, and usually the cabinet's locked purely because I don't want people stealing my things. But if you did want to go that extra mile to make sure your gun is secured, there's several things that you could do. Obviously locking in a cupboard, that's definitely not a bad idea. You could just buy any kind of metal box really, it's better than nothing. Or you could use a proper pistol case. So a pistol case such as this one, I've had this for years. I bought this years ago for air pistols, just for carrying them to the garden, but unfortunately I don't have any air pistols anymore. But something like this wouldn't be a bad idea to store blank firing or other replica guns. As right now in the UK, that's absolutely fine. I will say this, I don't think that you'll get away with keeping air pistols in this in Scotland for your safe storage requirements. I was refused a license, and this is one of the things that I suggested. I'll keep the guns in chained to the wall, that is. But this is just your standard pistol case. This is just a cheap one off eBay. It's just plastic. It's definitely not that secure, but if you just want to keep children away from it, something like this would be absolutely fine. It's a fairly inexpensive option, and obviously with that foam in there, it'll keep your gun safe. So obviously you could just put the gun in there, close these two latches, and just put a standard padlock on it, and that'll keep it away from unwanted hands, anyone under 18 or anyone that you think shouldn't have access to it. Speaking of under 18s, there's no age requirements to shoot a blank firing gun. You could give this to a 10-year-old to shoot, and they can even keep it themselves, to the best of my knowledge. I really wouldn't do that though. Really, this should be used by someone who is, I mean, I see nothing wrong with a 14-year-old owning one of these, so long as they've got parental consent and they're a sensible person. But really, adult supervision should be there when these are being fired. But as I said, you only have to be 18 to buy one of these. Another potential option is a gun cable lock. This is one that I got free with an air rifle years ago when I could still have air rifles. Obviously I kept it. Now these are actually perfect for pistols. There's a couple ways you could use these. In fact, there's only one way you could use this on a blank firer. For gas blowback airsoft, there's two ways if you're so inclined. Keeping in mind, a lot of airsoft gas blowbacks are very similar to air pistol gas blowbacks. They're basically the same thing, they just fire a different pellet. Remove the magazine, rack the slide back, and then simply just, if I can get it through, and there you go, you could just lock that. What this does is two things. It prevents you placing the magazine into the gun, and the gun cannot be closed. Therefore the gun cannot be fired, rendering it inoperable. Further to that, you could also get a lock that goes over the trigger guard, although they sometimes can still be fired. They're easily defeated from what I've heard. You can still fire it, but again, something like this, if you live with people that you don't want to get their hands on this, it's just another option. And obviously you could use something like this to chain it to a fixed feature of the building. I like to drop the firing pin, I don't like leaving them in a cocked position. These cable locks also work with revolvers. Simply remove the cylinder and feed it through, and now the cylinder cannot be closed. I did say that this does work a second method with airsoft and air pistols, but I didn't realise that the barrel would be a bit too small. But one other thing you can do, which is what I was going to say, is you could sometimes feed this through the barrel and it'll come out, and obviously you could lock it that way. But the barrel is actually a bit too narrow, so assuming the barrel is wide enough, you could also do that. Now for the part that absolutely nobody wants to hear, but is possibly one of the more important points of this video, is your own protective equipment. I did say that firing this is quite similar to firing a live firearm, and it is a really loud bang, and you really do want to protect your eyes and ears when shooting. I won't fire one of these without hearing protection because it's painful. I mean, it's loud even with hearing protection. It doesn't make you a hard man to fire it without it, it's just dumb. The same as using like a chainsaw or a strimmer without hearing protection is dumb. I mean, for example, if I was to use a chainsaw for just 2 minutes without hearing protection, that's instant hearing damage. Now, I'm still young right now, and I won't feel the effects until I'm older, 60 or 70. The same thing applies with blank firing replicas, or even live firearms, of course. It's not worth risking my hearing just to look like a bit of a hard man, and honestly, it's impressing absolutely nobody. So wearing your hearing protection. Anything's better than nothing. This, I think this is ex-British Army issues, hearing defenders. My dad gave me these years ago. They're not expensive, you can get them for about £10 on eBay, as well as many surplus shops. It's worth it to get it to protect your hearing. If you could spend £100 on a replica gun, £20 per 50 blanks, it's certainly worth spending £10 to protect your ears. If you've messed up your ears, you've messed up your ears, you're going to have trouble hearing in the future. And I've noticed that there's a lot of videos on YouTube of people using blank firing replicas without putting something over your ears. Really, it's a good idea to protect your hearing. Not only that, wear something to protect your eyes. Now, admittedly, these are not ideal. This is just what I use in my workshop when I'm using my table saw or my lathe. But it's important to protect your eyes. And although there's no projectile that could ricochet, keep it in mind the blast, and when I say the blast, I mean the blast is coming out of there. Especially if you think about it, the recoil sort of angles the gun a bit more towards you. So if there's a small piece of debris or anything in the way of that breech and that gets blasted into your eyes, you can say goodbye to your eyes. And there is, albeit a very small possibility, next to non-existent, but there is that possibility that a shell might be ejected and it might hit your face. That said, anyone standing around you should also wear the same protective equipment. So I think that's pretty much it. I really hate to preach to people, and as I said, I'm quite a freedom-minded person, but we have basically no gun rights in the UK at all, and I think it's just inevitable that the law will change against our favour. I think what it takes to preserve these few rights and freedoms we do have, especially in regards to replicas and things like that, is people being sensible and sensible people fighting against the laws. Like I said, if people are going to threaten their neighbours with things like this, if they're going to shoot it in silly places or fire it out car windows or anything like that, it's just, our hobby is going to just be criminalised like many other hobbies. Like I said, I was refused an airgun licence for ridiculous grounds. Unfairly, I feel. At least we could still have these, and if people continue to misuse them, the government are just going to crack down and ban them. So please think about what you do. I'm not saying don't buy them, I'm not saying don't have fun with them. I would encourage you, if it's something you're into, to do your research, learn the law. If possible, find somewhere you could shoot them. I understand that that's not possible for everyone. It's certainly not possible for me, but at least I can collect them. I will say I would absolutely love to buy more blank firing guns. I do have the means to do it. I'm just very put off buying them, as I do fear a change in the law. I fear that these might someday be either banned outright, which I think is the thing that's less likely to happen, or the government will require a license. For example, you need a full firearms license to buy this exact same thing in Australia. That doesn't apply in the UK, and we know how bad UK gun laws are, and the fact that I could still go online and buy this is amazing. Now, hopefully you've worked out that I'm not a bad person. I don't mean any ill will on anybody. I don't want to hurt anyone. I'm not someone that's going to go on a school shooting or threaten someone or, you know, point a gun at someone in anger. I'm genuinely just a hobbyist. I just find guns interesting. I enjoy them for many reasons, and I'm sure you do too. But let's do what we can to protect the sport, to protect the hobby, to protect our collections. Let's act responsibly. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, this has probably gone on long enough. Hopefully, if you're new to blank firing guns, you've taken something from this. I know that my practices might not even be the best, even while I'm trying to explain it to you. But I don't think I've done anything dangerous. If I've done something wrong, you're welcome to point it out in the comments, because, you know, I'm not a hypocrite. We all make mistakes. But the reason we follow these safe handling rules is so we don't make mistakes, so we don't cause injury to anyone or ourselves, or damage the property. That said, if you found this interesting or you want me to make more videos like this, let me know in the comments, and I would absolutely love to make more videos on blank firing guns. If this gets enough, I don't want to say enough likes, but if people like this enough, as in you found it of value, especially blank firing gun content as a whole, please let me know, and I might think about getting another one to review on the channel, because I do enjoy collecting them. These are the only two I have. I've got a third one, but it's broken, it can't be shot, it's basically falling apart. I did see one that I liked in my local gun shop, and I did thinking about saving up to buy it, but as I said, I'm a little bit put off. But again, please let me know your thoughts. Thanks, and I'll see you later.